Today I want to show you how to make a dish that I really love and that comes together so quickly once you get all the chopping done. This is a polenta dish, or as we say in the South, grits. And I like it a little spicy, but you can leave the spice out if you want. The way I choose the vegetables is by color, and also by what may be going bad in my refrigerator if I don't go ahead and use it. So I like to put together a lot of colors that are going to be very appetizing. And so to start with, we're going to take some homemade cream cheese. I have a recipe for this on the site, so you can look that up. This is a vegan cream cheese, or if you don't feel like making it, you can buy it. I frankly have never had a vegan cream cheese that I bought that I really like, so I prefer to make my own. This is made from cashews. It only takes about 5 minutes to make a vegan cream cheese. And another thing we're going to add to this is miso. I like to use this organic white miso. I have used red miso when I discovered I didn't have any of the white, and it works just fine, except that it muddies the color, and I prefer to have a nice white color to this, or a light color. I don't like to have it look muddy, but it was delicious. It tasted pretty much the same. And I used 2 tablespoons of miso. If you're not familiar with miso, it's very salty. And so you can add this to most dishes to replace the salt in it. And apparently, if you want to believe the science, and I do, is that miso doesn't have the same harmful effects that table salt has on your body, or any salt for that matter. So I prefer to use it when I can as a salt substitute. And I go ahead and mix this in with the water because it's easier to do this now than later, and before I turn on the temperature. When you buy miso, it has this little paper on the top, or this little cover. Leave that on there. And then this fits right back over it and snaps into place, and that's how you store it. So I'm going to turn this on and bring this to a low boil. And while that's starting, I'm going to start these other vegetables. Also, I like to keep another cup or 2 of water on the side. This will thicken a great deal. The grits or the polenta will thicken. By the way, polenta and grits are the same product. The polenta will thicken by itself, but also the cream cheese will thicken it as well, because as cashews cook, they thicken. And this will make it a very nice creamy polenta. And so, but we may have to thin it a little bit as we go. I'm going to start with the onions. And like I said, I just choose this on the basis of what I have in the refrigerator, or what I think goes well together, or what's about to expire. You know, all of these are pretty fresh, so I'm not too concerned about it. But I like to start with the onions and the bell peppers because they cook the fastest. They take the long. I like to start with the onions and bell peppers because they take the longest to cook. So I used a cup of onions, a cup of bell peppers, and a cup of each of the bell peppers, rather. And I'll also go ahead and add the mushrooms. We don't need any oil in this. It's completely unnecessary, and as a matter of fact, it tastes better without it. And I don't add any salt to this because you have plenty of salt in the polenta. And so you won't even notice it with your... So I used 10 ounces of mushrooms, which made about 2 cups. And I cut them in quarters. I cut the bell peppers in thick strips, and then I cut them in half. And the onions I cut in strips, a little thicker than your normal julienne, but it's the way that I like it. You can do whatever you want. Now you have to be careful not to overcook, or rather boil the cream cheese, because it will start to separate, just like cream will. This plant-based cream cheese that I make is wonderful for using as a cream replacement in just about any recipe that calls for cream. And I'll keep flipping this. We don't want it to scorch, but we do want it to cook. I like using this wide pan because it allows me to move everything around. I didn't have a stainless pan that was this big, so that's why I chose this one. I added just a little water just to encourage it steaming a little bit. And it will help encourage the mushrooms to release some of their liquid. The colors are just gorgeous. And the fragrance is really becoming wonderful. We're searing the onions a little bit, which is perfect because that brings out the natural sweetness of the onion. I actually am using a sweet onion in this recipe. But I don't always. I use whatever I have or whatever feels right to me at the time. Remember that recipes are just guides. You're free to create whatever you like. You can put carrots in this too if you wanted to. I often do. I just didn't feel like it today. Actually, I didn't think about it. Okay, this is starting to boil a little bit. And we do not want it to separate, so we are going to go ahead and put in, first I'm going to put a little water in this to keep it from scorching while I'm not paying close attention to it. So we are going to stir in the polenta. And you have to stir this in slowly because if this starts clumping on you, you're in big trouble. Just make sure it gets stirred in real well, and then you won't have any problem for the rest of the time you're cooking. Okay. Did you get the lid for this pot, please? We're going to turn this down now to a simmer and let this cook slowly. It only takes about 5 minutes for polenta to cook. Now we're going to add the squash, both of them. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. And we just want to cook the squash enough that their color starts to deepen. We like for our vegetables to still have a little bit of crunch in them. Or I do. If you want to cook it down to a mush, that's entirely up to you. And we wait to put the tomatoes in there until everything else is cooked basically the way you want it. Because tomatoes will tend to, sometimes it will retard the cooking process of other vegetables. So to be on the safe side, it's best to add them last in a recipe like this. Unless you're going to cook it for a very long time, I always add the tomatoes last. Check on this. See, it's already thickening up. And you want to keep stirring it because you don't want it to become a thick clump. You want it to remain creamy. Another thing I like to do is add some spice to my polenta. These are crushed peppers. These are actually organic peppers that I got from friends or who grew them in their yard, or from the farmer's market, and I just dried them and combined them. So they're not all really red like you see in the grocery store, but they are wonderful. And I really like spicy food. If you don't care for it, don't add it, or add a lot less. See how creamy that is? Now let's see what's going on over here. This looks pretty good. Put that little guy back in there. Oh, it smells so good. You see one that's not getting color, push it down to the bottom. And by color, what I mean is that the natural color of it deepens just a little bit. I believe this is 2. There we go. At this point, I am going to add basil. I'll start with a tablespoon and see if that does the trick. Now there's just 2 people in my family, so this is obviously more than we will eat in a meal. But we'll come back tomorrow and I'll show you what to do with the leftovers, or on my next video. I think a tablespoon is plenty. Okay. This is excellent with fresh basil, but you wouldn't add it at this point. You would add it just before you serve it. So if you want to use fresh basil, and it's really, really good with fresh basil, but this isn't the season for it. So unless I want to spend a fortune on it at the grocery store, I will be satisfied with dried. And so if you're using fresh basil, it should always be added at the end of a meal, because otherwise you won't get the wonderful flavor. And just cut it into a chiffonade, you know, just little strips of basil, and put it on top just as you serve it. I've got some little browning in this pan, and this pan can have more water in it. Because a little liquid with it is actually quite nice in the final product. So we're just going to heat those tomatoes through and check on our polenta, and it looks pretty good. I'm going to taste this polenta to make sure that it's cooked and not, it's not still grainy. You know, it can use a few more minutes. Ooh, that is spicy, and I'm going to put a little bit more water in it. I kept my whisk in that water, that cup of water. So that's why this water is cloudy, but it's not a problem for the dish. So because I'm going to cook it a few minutes longer, I'm going to go ahead and have it a little thin right now. And this is about done. It smells fantastic. I used a whole package of these little tomatoes. They were 10 ounces. Mainly because I forgot they were there and I knew that they were going to go bad if I didn't use them, so I decided just to use all of them. And I think it's worked out quite nicely. I usually put more mushrooms in it than this, but that's what I felt like doing today, and hey, that's good enough reason as any. I'm going to turn this off now because I don't want it cooking anymore. Actually, I'll turn it down. I'm going to keep that slightly on. And in the meantime, I am going to put our bowls in the microwave for a minute just to heat them so that this is going into a nice hot bowl. Okay, this is ready. Now I have to tell you, this is spicy. So if you want it less spicy, then put in less pepper. I have found that my homemade, my home ground pepper or crushed pepper is a bit spicier than what you find at the store. But I like it that way. I broke my wrist about a year ago, and I still have trouble holding my bowl, my pan. Okay. So you just spoon this on top, and you're good to go. We'll come back later, and I'll show you in another video what we do with these leftover vegetables. I don't always cut all of this stuff up at the, or have all of these at the stove. I just find it easier with the camera to do everything in one spot. Okay, so polenta with vegetables.